We go now to Ms. Rempel-Garner, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so what's happened here today? So we're in the parliamentary committee, the Standing Committee on Health. So the Standing Committee on Health, I'm the vice chair for that, and as a member of Parliament, I sit on this committee. There are other members on this committee. There are some Liberal members. There are, and then there's also a member from the NDP and from the Bloc and from the Conservatives. Now, because we're in a minority parliament, the minority part, like the parties that aren't in government, so the NDP, the Bloc, and the Conservatives, we actually have the majority of votes on this committee. That means that when we work together as opposition parties, we can pass things, even though the Liberals are in government. And so what happens is when the Liberals, they know that the opposition parties have worked together and they don't want to work with us to do something. What happens is they do something called a filibuster. And that means that rather than letting a motion come to a vote, they just put up speakers and talk the clock out. Now, I have to explain something that's really important. You guys, anybody watching this right now is watching me in my headsets in my living room here. And that's because Parliament isn't meeting in the actual House of Commons because of COVID. We're meeting in something called hybrid sittings. Now, how this impacts and benefits the Liberals when they filibuster is that as opposed to when we regularly meet in the House of Commons, we could continually meet like these filibusters. Eventually somebody tires out, right? But the Liberals have a benefit in that we need to have translation services and IT services online in order for the meeting to continue. So all the Liberals have to do to stop a motion from passing is talk the clock to a certain point where these resources aren't available.
Mr. Chair.
And today...
Ms. O'Connell, on a point of order, please go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just on a technical point, the member opposite pointed out that she is speaking in reference to a stream that she's running right now, but it's my understanding that procedurally comments should be going through the chair. And in terms of relevance, she's not actually speaking about the motion at hand because her motion actually would have limited the PMPRB study to 1 day instead of 2, which is what we actually agreed to and really want to get to that study next week. Unfortunately, the member opposite isn't speaking to the motion that she did where she was actually the motion on the table actually was taking a meeting away from the study of PMPRB, which is what we've been fighting for. So I just want her comments to go through the chair on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. We're getting to debate. Ms. Rempel-Garner on the same point of order.
Actually, I'm good, Chair. I'll just continue. So again, Chair, so what just happened there was an example of the Liberals filibustering this. So what they're hoping to do is that the clock will get to 6:30 and that we can't vote on this motion. I'm going to get to the motion in a second, but I think anybody who is watching would see what's happening here. So there's a bunch of Liberals that are lined up to speak on this motion. And so I'm about to do something that is going to let me make sure that we get the motion passed. Now, what is the motion that I'm speaking to today? The motion that I'm speaking to today is in order for the House of Commons, in order for the Standing Committee to proceed, we have to have something called programming. Anybody who's watching this would understand, like if you're scheduling meetings out, you have to have a schedule of orders. And in the House of Commons, in standing committees, there's rules on how that happens. You actually have to pass a motion to get that done. So the opposition parties work together to get meetings on the schedule on a bunch of really important topics to Canadians. First of all, the government's response to COVID. There's so many things that we need to be talking about, like vaccine delivery schedules, second dosing schedules, this big report that came out yesterday with regard to border measures and the quarantine hotel. There's a lot of things. So we want meetings on that. There's also another issue that is really important to Canadians that my colleague from the Bloc Québécois, who's been supporting this, has been pushing, as well as my colleague from the NDP, and it's called the PMPRB. People will be watching this and they'll be going, well, what's that? It relates to drug prices. And my colleague from the Bloc Québécois actually had a study on this, and we haven't had meetings scheduled on this in quite some time.
Mr. Chair. Point of order, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, can you clarify with the clerk the member can live stream when the committee is happening?
You're on mute, Chair.
Sorry, I will in fact ask the clerk, is it appropriate to live stream on Facebook a proceedings from the House?
That's a good question. Let me check. So it's webcast.
Yep, it's webcast. It's through the tradition. It's through the regular web key.
So let me get back to you. I'm not sure about the answer. Let me get back to you in 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. But I would suggest Ms. Rempel-Garner speak to the committee and not to the audience.
Sure, I'm speaking to you, Chair. I'm speaking through you. So what's happening here is that the Liberals now they're trying to shut down.
Sorry, Mr.
any
Chair,
sort
can
of
we just point of order?
The Liberals are trying to shut down.
Mr. Chair,
getting democracy sent out. They're trying to shut down what I'm doing right now. They don't want anybody in Canada to see this. They don't want to see the dirty little secrets behind
Ms. O'Connell on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's no secrets here. The member opposite, frankly, is lying. Her own motion actually was reducing the PMPRB study that we already agreed to. But my point of order, Mr. Chair, is that we should suspend until we get the answer to Ms. Sadhu's question.
Mr. Clerk, do we have any kind of timeline for when you might get an answer on that?
Give me 2 or 3 minutes. I got an answer for you. I'm calling my.
You're on mute, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Very well. We will suspend for 3 minutes.
I challenge your ruling. I challenge your ruling. I challenge your ruling. I challenge your ruling. I challenge your ruling.
We are suspended.
I challenge your ruling.
Ms. Rempel-Garner.
Thank you. So the motion that I moved today, Chair, was really important because it would set the direction of the Health Committee for the next several weeks. And the Liberals, I don't think they want Canadians to see this. So the motion would bring department officials, the minister, people in front of committee to look at these really important issues on drug prices, on COVID-19. And what they did today is instead of letting this motion pass, they're putting up speakers so that resources will run out. Can you believe that? It's not great. I thought this motion was it was built in a collaborative way. It allows other parties, different parties to invite the witnesses that they want. There's no partisan language in it. In fact, I can post it later so people can look at it. But at the end of the day, if this motion had passed today, what it would mean is that we would have a meeting on Monday on this drug price issue. But because they are filibustering the meeting, it means that meeting is lost. What the Liberals want to have happen, Chair, is that they want to have this subcommittee meeting on Monday. They're using procedure. They're trying to use procedure to block this motion. They want to have a subcommittee meeting, which takes a meeting off the table. Then the subcommittee would have to approve this motion, and then it would have to go to another full committee. And then these meetings would be scheduled. So we're losing weeks and meetings as opposed to just dealing with it today, right? And that's why the filibuster is happening. Again, this is all really technical procedure, but at the end of the day, by passing this motion today, we could have had meetings on the drug price issue and the COVID-19 stuff next week. Would have been done right away. But now we don't know when this is going to happen. So what we need to do is force the Liberals to have a meeting on Monday so that this gets passed. And this sort of thing is so frustrating for us because we could have passed this motion today. The Liberals so far, they haven't raised any substantive objections to the motion. They haven't proposed amendments to the motion. That's typically what happens in debate on a motion. Like they would say, okay, well, I don't like this part of it. Could we do that? We've had no debate on that today. If anybody wants to look back, Chair, and see the debate on this motion, there has been no amendments raised by the Liberals on this issue. They've just been talking, I think they talked about Minecraft for a while, actually. They read something about Minecraft. It's really interesting. I need to look at other options because we're going to run out of resources here. There's a bunch of Liberal hands up. Can you believe that Parliament is shut down because we don't have IT resources or translation resources? Thank you to the translators, by the way. But usually, when in regular times, you can see how COVID affects Parliament is that, these filibuster things get out. So I need to look at other options. And in order for me to do these other options so I can have not lose all these meetings that we have, I have to do something procedurally here right now so that I can use another tactic to get a meeting on Monday. So, Mr. Chair, all this said, I just want to thank my colleagues, particularly from the Bloc and the NDP. Mr. Theriault has been fighting really hard on the drug price issue. So has my colleague, Mr. Don Davies from the NDP, but particularly on COVID. I think this committee has been a really good example of how opposition parties can work together in a minority parliament in order to hold the government to account. And so with that, Mr. Speaker, with the intent of making sure that we can get a meeting on Monday and make sure that the Liberals can't use procedure to make sure that doesn't happen, I move to adjourn the meeting.
The motion to adjourn is in order. I will ask do we have agreement to adjourn the meeting? Let me first say. No. So I'll ask the chair to conduct a vote, or sorry, the clerk to conduct a vote.
Thank you for the promotion. Miss O'Connell?
No.
Mr. Kellaway?
No.
Mr. Pawlowski?
No.
Miss Sidhu?
No.
Mr. Van Bynen?
No.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Mr. D'Entremont?
Oui.
Mr. McGuire?
Yes.
Miss Rampel Garner?
Yes.
Monsieur Theriault?
Oui.
Mr. Davies?
Oui.
So, Mr. Chair, we have 5 nays, 6 yeas. So, motion.
Thank you, Mr.
Shameful
Clerk.
that, Mr. Chair, on a point of order, it's shameful that the member
Meeting's over.
opposite just shut
Thank
down Parliament.
Yeah, thank you, Mr.